on simplex. I can go on the 144 megahertz band. I can go on the 220 megahertz band. I can go on the 442 megahertz band. The higher the frequency I use, the easier this signal penetrates the walls because the wavelengths are shorter. Here's another example. You're in a car, you're going to LAX. You're on Sepulveda, and just as you get to LAX, you go under the runway, right? If you have it on an AM station, let's say like 10 every in a dial, that's 1 megahertz, 0.07. Once you go under that tunnel, that radio station kind of goes away. Press FM, because those stations are up around 100 megahertz. Now the FM station is clear as a bell. See, the wavelengths get, the frequency got higher, the wavelengths got shorter, and so the penetration gets much better. That's what So it says if you had a dual band radio, 2 meters and 440, you have better communications with a higher frequency, the 440. Okay, let's keep going. Grid squares. This is a stupid thing to memorize. Amateur radio, there's some people on amateur radio who have broken up the entire Earth into these little squares. Each square is, don't memorize any of this, each square is 1 degree of lat, 2 degrees of long. Each square has a 2-letter, 2-numbered, it's called grid locator. A grid locator is a letter, number, designator assigned to a geographic location. So I'm going to show you the next chart. This is a funny thing. Okay. So, and again, it's part of the context. These guys have broken up the whole Earth into different places. I think down here we are GM03 down here. And so they'll have a contest where you have to make your contact with as many hands and as many grid squares around the world as possible. They'll memorize any of that. It's just part of the game. Fabulous. Let's go to E. Find my pointer. Okay. E is called repeaters. So now we're going to get into what repeaters are all about. Okay. If I'm on one side of Palos Verdes and you're on the other side of Palos Verdes and we're using these frequencies go only like that, straight. They don't bounce off the sky, they don't do anything else. So if I'm on the north side of Palos Verdes and you're over at Ternea, we can't hear each other. So we have to talk to a repeater. Now, how does the repeater work? Well, the repeater is a receiver and a transmitter. Remember I said these days we don't have receiver and transmitters anymore, we have transceivers. But a repeater is a receiver and a transmitter. So what the receiver does, it listens on one frequency, and what it hears, it puts right into its transmitter, and it retransmits it on a different frequency. So it listens 360 degrees, right? So if I take my handheld and I transmit on that frequency, that's the repeater's input, its ears. As soon as the repeater hears me, it puts me on the other frequency and it retransmits me on its output. It's called a repeater. Okay? So a repeater receives on its input frequency and transmits on its output frequency simultaneously. So when I talk to a repeater, I can be sitting here talking, you can be listening to the repeater, and you'll hear me right now. And then when I let go, you start talking, the same thing happens, I hear you over here. So with radios like this, normally you wouldn't be able to talk more than a couple miles from here. But because the repeaters are up on the hills, like Palos Verdes, Wilson, my gosh, you can talk up to the repeater, because it's nice and clear line of sight. The repeater transmits all the way around, and so that signal could be coming down somewhere else. So I could be talking to somebody down in Huntington Beach, okay? Because up on Palos Verdes, it's line of sight, clear line of sight to Huntington Beach. So here's all you got to know. It retransmits the signal of a ham station on a different frequency. It listens to the one frequency and retransmits on a different frequency. Okay? I will tell you though that this question, T1F09, doesn't use the word frequency. It uses the word channel. In the world of amateur radio, we don't have channels. We have frequencies. Okay? If you had a commercial radio like this that you bought down at Radio Shack, yes, it has 12 channels. You don't have to have a license for it. It's just 12 channels. In the world of amateur radio, it's frequencies, not channels. Okay? Okay. More about repeaters. Now, the frequency separation between the repeater's input and output frequency is called the offset. Remember, the repeater had two frequencies, ones it listens on and ones it retransmits on. Okay? The question pool says offset. Most hams call that the split, but that's okay. Either one's fine. question pulls us off. So here's a typical example of a repeater that's up on Palos Verdes. The repeater's transmits on this frequency, 145.38. So if you just wanted to hear it, you would just go to 145.38. And that's what's on right now, and I don't hear anything, so there's no one there. Okay, but to talk to that repeater, this radio has to transmit to the repeater's input, which is 144.78. So the difference between the two, the offset, is 0.6. Okay. Well, it turns out that this is all you have to memorize. On the 2 meter band, that's 144 to 148. The offset is 0.6. Okay. And sometimes it's 0.6 minus, sometimes it's 0.6 up. Don't worry about that. On this band here, that's the 70 centimeter band of 420, 450. It's 5 megahertz. Okay? So all you got to do is memorize the offsets for these bands. That's it. The 2 and 70 meter bands are the most common. When someone says I have a handheld and it's so if I have a handheld and it's a dual bander, then it's automatically going to be the 2 meter band and the 440 band. Okay? But all you got to do is memorize the numbers, the offset numbers. Okay, here's a little bit more technical problem. Let's say that there's a repeater up here in Palos Verdes, and this actually happened at a repeater at my house, so it's kind of interesting that's in the question here. Let's say there's a repeater here in Palos Verdes that someone owns, and it has a certain frequency, right, input and output. Okay, fine. So 2 hams, C and D, they can talk to each other through this repeater. Well, 100 miles away, down near San Diego, there's a mountain called Mount Palomar. Well, maybe some hams down there, and this was a real story, they had a repeater down there that was exactly the same frequencies as this one. Exactly the same. And hams down there would talk through that repeater. Until one day, this is what's happening. One day, one of these hams got on, talked through this repeater. His signal made it all the way down to Mount Palomar, line of sight, and it went to this repeater, and these 2 hams just said, wait a minute, who's that? I don't know. Well, then they figured out that this guy, when he turned his radio on, he could activate this repeater, and these hams would hear it. Who's that? Okay, so that's the background. Okay. So here's the problem. Repeaters A and B use the same input and output frequencies. Radio C and D typically communicate through here. E and F talk through here. When E transmits, repeater B, when he transmits to repeater B, he can also unintentionally activate repeater A. Same thing with D. Okay? So the solution was to add what's called a sub-audible tone. We'll get to that in a second. So to your radio signal, and then to use the tone featured on the repeater. Here's what's going to happen. When I transmit to this repeater in Palos Verdes, instead of just retransmitting me, rebroadcasting me, retransmitting me, it's going to put a little tone in here, which you don't hear. It might be 100 hertz, it might be 90 hertz, but it's going to be a sub-audible tone. Okay? So it's going to come out of my radio. When the repeater hears my signal, it will only rebroadcast it if it has the sub-audible tone that it's been programmed for. So if this repeater says, well, I've been programmed only to rebroadcast signals that have a 100 hertz sub-audible tone, fine, good. So what these 2 guys had to do was one guy put one sub-audible tone on his repeater, this guy put a different one on his repeater, problem solved. So they technically use this letter, CTCSS, continuous tone coded squelch system. That's going to be the question in your tool right there. But most hams have a simple way to call this. It's called the PL tone, private line tone, and that's what we all call the PL tones. And it was trademarked by Motorola many years ago. But that's the thing that's going to be in your thing, continuous tone, and that's what's. So when you get your radio, say, okay, what repeaters am I using? And then you'll wind up getting a little book that says, oh, that repeater has a 90 hertz sub-audible tone, or 100 hertz. When I program this thing up for that frequency, I'll program in the PL, then I hit the memory channel. So when I go to that memory, everything comes up. Okay? Okay. Did we hit the end of this? No, we're not finished. Okay. A repeater using a tone activates only, the repeater activates only when it detects the tone. So when it hears my signal come in, if it doesn't see the tone that it is programmed for, it will not repeat. It will not repeat that signal. There's around 36 sub-audible tones, and you don't have the Gordy book. Gordy book is here, but he has them on one of his pages. It's not important what they are, okay? But it is important when you get your radios to know what tone you're going to use. So if you can hear a repeater but can't get access to it, then you may not have applied the tone to your radio, or have applied the wrong tone. Okay. This question here says, first it is audio tone burst and DCS tone sequences. I have no clue what that all means. Don't worry about that. This is the real thing, but this is the word they use. The point is this. You say, gee, I try to get into this repeater, but I can't. Then you haven't programmed the right tone, more than likely. And again, you can store the tones in your in your memories when you store the frequency stuff. Repeaters. A repeater has a courtesy tone to indicate when a transmission is done. I can't get the repeater up here. Let's see. I can't hit it. No, I'm not hitting it. What happens is this. Let's say that you and I are talking through a repeater. So I'm talking. And when I'm done, you don't hear my voice. Well, how do you know I'm done? How do you know I simply have still got my finger on the button and now I'm kind of doing this? Because you've got the squelch on, remember? And the squelch keeps the noise off. So there's no noise when no one's talking, and there's no noise if I've got my finger on a button and I'm not talking. There's still no noise. So I talk to you, talk, and then I'm kind of done. How do you know when I'm really done, or if I've just took a pause or still got my finger button? The repeater waits to hear no more signal. The signal? No signal. As soon as the repeater says, oh, the signal went away, it goes beep. When you hear the tone, you know the other person has stopped transmitting. So then you start transmitting. And when you let go of that button, the repeater will go beep. And so the courtesy tone at the end of everybody's transmission, the repeater puts on, and that's when you know the other person has stopped talking. When using a repeater, pause briefly between transmissions to see if anybody else wants to pause. So if you and I are talking, what a lot of people do is talk, and then you go talk, and talk. Well, if I'm listening to you and I want to jump in and chat with you, I don't have a chance to get in. So when one person finishes, why don't you wait about a second and a half when the other person comes on? Because that way, if the third person wants to talk, they can jump in and say, K1DFO. Oh, K1DFO is there. So that's what that's about. If no one is using a repeater, then you can use it, but you don't have to say CQ. Now, on a repeater, we don't say CQ. Okay? We simply give our call sign. So if I want to use a repeater and there's no one using it, I'll just get on and say, hey, this is K1DFO. Or I can say, this is K1DFO. Does anybody want to chat? So when you hear someone just giving their call, that means they're looking for someone to talk to on a repeater. When you use a repeater, you still only need to give your call every 10 minutes or at the end of the communication. Even though the repeater has a call, you still need to give your call. The repeater must give its call every 10 minutes. Now, whose call does the repeater give? The call station of the ham who owns the repeater. So every 10 minutes, that repeater is going to give a call there. Sometimes it'll do it Morse code, and sometimes it'll do a little audio recording. Oh, this is a W6TMJ repeater. Okay, fine. So repeaters are programmed to do that typically in Morse code, which is CW, or using a voice emission, which we just did. There are books that list all the repeaters in the country. So every couple of years they publish the book. And all you got to do is pick a state, pick a city. Then it'll be the 2-meter band, the 220-meter band, the 420 band. You go right down through there. It'll tell you all the repeater frequencies, what the call is of the person who owns it. It'll also give you the PO that you have to put in your radio in order to activate the repeater. So you say, hey, I'm going to be traveling up to Lake Tahoe. It'd be nice to be able to get some of the repeaters, the one at Bishop, the one at Mammoth, Well, they're all in the book. Okay. And when you're local, for some of the local repeaters, not all of them, a couple of the radio stores give out this little map. And it's got some of the mountains around here, and it's got a bunch of the more popular frequencies. Okay.
It's 8:15.
It's 8:15? Okay.
You know what? On the board right there.